If we continue down our present path, life in the UK is going to be rather bleak. I'm not a political person for two reasons. I think nearly all politicians are completely ineffective and a waste of space, and I'm a busy man. I've got better things to do than listen to the same old claptrap over and over again. I have, however, been following both Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson for the past few years because I now seriously believe that this country has reached a tipping point. A point where we have months, not years, to change course and start putting a lot of things right, and neither of the two main political parties seem to have any idea of how to do this. So first, the bullet points concerning what's gone wrong. In a properly functioning economy, freedom is assured. Only in countries where there's not enough money to go round does a particular group seize control and maintain their comfortable lifestyle by cruelty. Arguably, the rot set in Britain in the Industrial Revolution. As it petered out, power shifted from the regions like Glasgow, Belfast, Manchester, Birmingham and South Wales to London. Power and wealth that were once reasonably well spread out became concentrated, and not in the hands of the wealth creators anymore, but in the hands of the bureaucrats. Coincidentally, it was massive and overwhelming bureaucracy that led to the formation of the Soviet Union. I switched from Microsoft Windows last year for 4 reasons, although there were many others. Primary reasons: there were too many updates taking too long to download and install. The defrag would run without my permission and I couldn't control it. Again, it slowed down my office work. I looked at the router and I could see from the output how much data Microsoft was taking, even when the machine was doing nothing for me. It was sat there, and yet enormous amounts of data were going from my PC through the router out onto the internet and to Microsoft headquarters. 4th reason: I read on the internet, an expert had carried out some research on this, and he described the amount of data that Microsoft were taking from a PC as eye-watering. So I had someone build me a Linux Mint PC. It worked very well. So well, in fact, that I decided to set up my own company, and I now make 3 models of Linux computers. The Lexis, what I call the entry-level computer, although the so-called entry-level computer is currently handling 35 of my IT clients. This is the machine on the left. The machine on the right I use primarily for my YouTube work. I've got 4 YouTube channels and do quite a lot of complicated video editing. It has a quite sophisticated graphics card, and I couldn't be happier. I am so glad I got rid of Microsoft Windows. And let's not forget that way back in the 1940s, George Orwell wrote 1984 and Animal Farm. Significantly, his daytime job was a tax inspector, so he probably understood the bureaucratic bullying of the state from the inside. It's clear that today we're in a similar position to the old Soviet Union shortly before it collapsed from within. We've got bureaucracy for the sake of it, a dislike of private enterprise, a fear of free thinkers, a system running out of money, and the inevitability of a state apparatus which is on the ropes and is getting nasty. Since the 1950s, we've lost our industrial and commercial base, so why does this matter? Because business activity is the only source of real money other than borrowing. And following on from the first point, the scale of our borrowing from the international money markets has reached a point where global institutions may stop lending us money at any point. Should this happen, we'll see chaos, financial collapse, mass unemployment, banks running out of money, rioting in the streets, and something akin to a military government and martial law. It really is that serious. And that's why we should wake up and take seriously the state of the country's finances. Most people alive today are probably not aware that something similar to this, though not as bad, happened in the early 1970s. The country became technically broke, and the government had to apply for an emergency loan to the International Monetary Fund. During the same period, a plot was hatched, though it was never enacted, for the military to seize control of the government and oust the then Prime Minister, Harold Wilson. These things really happened. The whole mess festered on throughout the 70s and eventually led to the country voting for Margaret Thatcher. The left-wing mob today, who still vilify Thatcher, conveniently forget the state of the country was in before she became Prime Minister. So it almost happened once before and could just as easily happen again, except this time it will be worse, because our economy is actually more damaged than in the 1970s. The mistake that always gets made by the many talking head pundits and commentators is that they look only at a narrow and incomplete picture. Number one, they judge the UK's performance by looking at past UK performance, conveniently ignoring how well the rest of the world is actually doing. Instead, compare the UK's performance over time with that of the rest of the civilized world, and the picture looks much, much worse. Countries that were once deserts, swamps or wastelands, or that were war-ravaged, have now left us standing in terms of financial performance. And the rate at which they've provided improved living standards for their people is significantly greater than ours, because our living standards continue to fall. Mistake number two, they fail to consider the entirety of Britain's unsustainable economy. Back in the 1980s, we had industries, mining, steel production, automotive factories, coal, shipbuilding, aircraft building, all homegrown and all now gone. In addition to the very large industries, we used to have tens of thousands of smaller, self-contained industries, clothing manufacture, independent retail shops, component manufacturers, everything from making electric fires in Enfield to carpet manufacture in Kidderminster. Everything that we used in everyday life, from tables and chairs to plastic moulding, we actually made in this country, and the surplus was exported, and we made money out of that. Everything has gone, and it's gone directly or indirectly to China. By indirectly, I mean small UK businesses have been destroyed or have been taken over by American, French, German and Japanese businesses, which in turn have contracted their manufacturing to China. All the profits now go to China and the parent company wherever that is based. It's a fact, and recent EU surveys confirm this. In all economies, smaller businesses in total employ more people than the few large ones. In this country, there really is nothing left to generate wealth, to provide jobs, to pay the taxes that run the social welfare system. If you look at YouTube, you'll see, and I watched this, a video that looks back at life in the 1950s, how a bus driver could buy a house and support his wife and 2 children. That can't be done today. It takes 2 parents going out to work and at the same time claiming benefits for the children to cover the normal family living expenses. The government is borrowing to make up for the shortfall in basic family income and to try and mask the problem that we have of the high cost of living. It's unsustainable. The country can't pay out enormous welfare payments and overtax working people and then pay out on child benefit to everyone. This is nothing but a smoke and mirrors money-go-round. The problem is the increasing inequality. And I don't mean the millionaires and the billionaires. This country really doesn't have that many homegrown billionaires. I mean the inequality of the political class compared with the working class. I'm talking about civil servants, government and local officials, and the executives of so-called private companies that actually make all their profits by providing services to big government. Within this group, there are vast numbers of people with huge salaries that they have awarded themselves, together with multi-million-pound pension pots. What little money there now is in this country has been transferred from being evenly spread among the people who work for a living to two other groups of people, those connected to government and those being paid by government-funded benefits. Both the cost of government and the cost of so-called welfare has exploded beyond all reason. And it's happened because the politicians have used our money to bribe voters to vote for them. In a forlorn attempt to pay for all this, taxes on working people have in recent years increased and increased, causing a massive imbalance between income earned from work compared with income provided as a state benefit. For many years, the deteriorating financial position for working people has been masked by the availability of disproportionately cheap goods from China. In real terms, inflation corrected, the cost of clothes and all imported manufactured goods from China is disproportionately low. And this creates the false impression that many people are still comfortably well off, but they're just not. And thus Britain's entire financial position is based on a series of tricks and lies. We can't go on borrowing money to finance the benefits class. We can't go on borrowing money to finance poorly paid jobs that ordinary people do, and the administrative non-jobs linked to government. There's a precipice rapidly approaching. Pretty soon, the global institutions that are lending us eye-watering amounts of money will say enough is enough, and they'll just stop lending to us. The interest rate charged by the money markets for our country's borrowing is at an all-time high. This is signalling that our lenders consider us as a country to be a dodgy risk. In fact, it's probably the case that the only thing that stops them pulling the plug is that when they force us into national bankruptcy, all the money they've lent us so far will go up in smoke. There's an old saying: if you owe the bank a little bit of money and you can't repay it, you're in trouble. But if you owe the bank a lot of money and you can't repay it, they're in trouble. Before the Second World War, Britain was the world's preeminent nation, even more important globally than America. Obviously, the Second World War, combined with our abandoning of our global empire, cost us dearly. But other countries were damaged more. France, Germany, Japan, they sprung back. So why haven't we? Well, the clue is possibly something that Hitler said, that we were a nation of shopkeepers. At the time he said it, that wasn't actually true. But maybe he hit on an important character trait. Even back in the 1930s, too many people were more interested in being a middleman, an agent for work done by someone else, rather than actually making something from scratch themselves. Maybe this was a consequence of the class system, where it was considered that only stupid, poor people actually got their hands dirty. Well, whatever the reason, that attitude has cost us dearly, and now it needs to change. This attitude, that work is only for stupid people, has always been deeply embedded in our educational system. It's always been the case that schools train children for university, not a career, not to achieve something. So if you didn't transition from the sixth form into university, learning about something esoteric and of no practical value, then you were simply discarded, ejected from the system, and left to struggle yourself and find some menial job. Other countries were training young people to make cars, aircraft, ships, and now, computers and rockets. Going back almost 100 years, we actually had some very clever people developing these ideas, but without an established and skilled workforce, with a high degree of technical training, and companies employing all these skilled people, there was no one to turn these brilliant discoveries into products. So the inventors shrugged and they left for America. And British inventions such as jet engines and computers were developed profitably in America and not here. Our universities are now turning out the scientists that power America, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, but not this country. And I know from my own experience, because school friends with technical qualifications have left these shores. A rare opportunity still exists to put things right. There are new industries, electronics, computing, robotics, and they're not like the old dirty industries from which the British have traditionally recoiled. But even so, the political administrative classes that we've allowed to take control of everything are so technologically illiterate that they continue to focus on non-jobs, banking, managerial, supervisory, administrators. Doing what? Bureaucrats and ever more ignorant politicians see industry and commerce as the enemy for some reason. The Welsh Assembly has just voted for a 50% more bums on seats talking to each other through interpreters. Welsh politicians and bureaucrats in particular hate business. That's because business, left unfettered, has the ability to put money in people's pockets. People with money are dangerous because they're independent. As a result of this attitude, the figures are frightening. Just one example, in the last 10 years, the US economy has grown by 72%, while the UK economy has shrunk by 10%. The UK now has a smaller economy than every single one of the states of America. Even the poorest states, such as Louisiana and Arkansas, are better off. In the days when I used to own a TV, way back when, I remember a doctor describing all politicians as scumbags, and that comment really surprised me, an intelligent man saying that. That's why I remember it. Accepting for a moment that there are a few exceptions, obviously, I think it's fair to say that the political class as a group are not just useless, they've become dangerous. They generally work against the common good of the country and of the people. Looking again at that earliest statistic, America up 75% and Britain down 10% over 10 years. That means we're falling behind at the rate of 8% every year, and that failure may be accelerating. Without a change of direction, this country will cease to exist. And this, naturally enough, brings me to the issues of contrived and unrelenting mass, unregulated immigration, and Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson. Because these subjects, ever more poverty, ever worse living conditions, an elite detached political class who are in control, and the rise of political parties that promise to reverse this process are all interrelated issues. If you care about the future direction of this country, please like and subscribe this channel, and take a look at the follow-on episode to this video entitled The Plot to Erase White Culture from Britain. The perfect storm is forming. Tens of thousands of people claiming disability benefit when they're perfectly fit. Watching how to fake mental illness videos on TikTok. Knowing what to tell your doctor to get the best payout. People driving around in top-of-the-range Mercedes-Benz funded by disability allowance, and I have personal experience of these people. People in and around government being paid huge salaries and amassing £1 million pensions while making a complete pig's ear of running the country. Unemployment is rising. Pay rates are being forced down by unlimited legal immigration, let alone illegal immigration. Legal immigration is causing a wage problem. And hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants not working, living a life of fully expensed idleness, all while working people are paid salaries too low to afford a decent home and paying ever higher taxes to pay for big government throwing their money away. Not to mention council tax, food and fuel bills going through the roof. Labour governments in the past have always set about redistributing wealth because they're unable to think of ways to create wealth. The problem now is that the only people with wealth are the people connected to government, and they're certainly not going to redistribute that. You don't have to be a genius to work out that something is going to snap. There's a lot of talk right now about massive unregulated immigration. That's not a subject unrelated to finance. Politicians and dark forces are enabling vast immigration because so far conventional wisdom is that the more people in a country, that equates to a bigger economy. But China has a huge population that, when put to work, has created a huge economy. But individually, the people are still poor by Western standards. There are only two ways this can go, and they both involve massive change. Either someone seizes power who has the will and the competence to put this country back on its path to a wealth-creating society, or, as the company suffers financial collapse, people beg for more government control to get them out of the mess. Control of food supply, control of living accommodation, control of everything in everyday life, control of people's thoughts and opinions. The population will be on its knees, begging not to be hurt, content with the few scraps they're given by a government that now appears to be benevolent. And let's be honest, there are quite a few establishment people who very much like the sound of that. I'm going to go into all of this in one of my next videos, so look out for the plot to erase white culture from Britain. I happen to think the remorseless decline of Britain and an invasion of immigrants are both important issues. If you think so, please click the like button, subscribe, and leave your view in the comments while you still can, because this Labour government is working hard at shutting down free speech and independent thought. There's a thought.